if you're spending money on supplements, there is a very real chance you are wasting it. Not because supplements never work, but because most people take the wrong ones for the wrong reasons while expecting the wrong results. Because the truth is, there are only a few supplements that consistently do what people hope they will do. Some are situational, some are overrated, and some are, quite frankly, absolute garbage. So today, I want to help you separate useful from useless. If you're new here, my name is Daniel. I'm a health scientist with a bachelor's degree in health promotion and nutritional science, and I also have over 15 years of training experience. And I have taken almost everything at this point. I can't say that. I sound like an addict. People want an edge. They want better performance, better recovery, better focus, better health, better body composition. And they want it in a way that feels simple and efficient. And supplements are incredibly attractive because they seem to offer exactly that. Something small that feels like it might produce something big. Some are genuinely useful, some do exactly what they claim, or at least close enough to justify using them, but others do almost nothing beyond making you feel like you're doing something extra. So in this video, I'm going to break down what actually works, what only works in certain situations, and what is mostly just part of the hype. We're going to divide supplements into 3 categories: essential, situational, and unessential. And I will also give you some personal insight of which supplements I used to take, why I stopped taking some of them, and which ones I still use on a fairly regular basis. Before getting into specific supplements, I want to start with this. They are a supplement to your foundation, because if your sleep is poor, your nutrition is inconsistent, and your training is random or badly structured, supplements are not going to rescue your results. At best, they can give you a small increase in performance, recovery, or health. But focusing on your foundation, your training, your sleep, your nutrition, your consistency will usually give you a far larger return than any supplement ever will. That is the part that tends to get ignored because it's not as exciting. But those things are still doing most of the heavy lifting. Supplements can help. They just help most when the basics are already somewhat in order. And that is why I think people should be very careful not to confuse support with solution. Still, supplements are obviously interesting. They're intriguing, they're easy to buy, easy to use, and they give people a sense that they are optimizing something. So with that said, let's go through the supplements I would place in the essential category. Creatine. Creatine helps your body produce more of its immediate energy source. And in practical terms, that means more strength, more reps, better repeated performance over time, and usually a better training stimulus overall. And if your training improves consistently, your long-term results usually improve as well. It also supports protein synthesis, helps reduce muscle damage and inflammation after intense exercise, and can improve recovery between sessions. That alone would already make it worthwhile. But creatine is also interesting because its benefits is also relevant for the brain, which means creatine may also support cognitive performance, neural energy demands, and in some cases even help reduce mental fatigue, especially during repetitive tasks or periods of sleep deprivation. So when people ask whether creatine is worth taking, my answer is usually very simple. It's safe, it's cheap, it works. Next up, protein powder. And protein powder is a funny one because in one sense, it's one of the most useful supplements there is, and in another sense, it's not special at all. It's just convenient protein. It doesn't do anything extraordinary that food cannot do. If you already hit your daily protein target through regular food, then technically you do not need protein powder. But realistically, a lot of people struggle to consistently hit that target. Life gets busy, appetite varies, meals aren't always ideal, and this is where protein powder becomes genuinely useful. Not because it's superior, but because it makes the right behavior easier. And if protein powder helps you consistently get enough total protein in a convenient way, then it becomes a valuable tool. And I think that's the best way to view it. There is a big difference between something being necessary and something being helpful. Protein powder is often very helpful. The next one is caffeine, or in this case, pre-workout. Now this is another supplement that clearly works, and it works across several areas. Physically, caffeine can improve endurance, provide small to moderate benefits for muscular strength, movement velocity, and power output, and lower the feeling of effort during training. Mentally, it improves alertness, focus, attention, and reaction time. It can help with fatigue. It can help you feel sharper. It can help counter some of the cognitive decline that comes from sleep deprivation. Most people already know what caffeine feels like when it works well. You feel more awake, more switched on, more capable of acting. It absolutely has value. But here's the catch. More is not better, and tolerance builds fast. That's where many people go wrong. Something that starts as a useful performance tool slowly turns into daily dependency. And once that happens, you're no longer really using caffeine to gain an advantage. So yes, caffeine works. That part is not controversial, but it should be incorporated with intention. Next is vitamin D. It helps maintain strong bones, it supports the immune system, it contributes to healthy muscle and nerve function. There's also evidence including potential effects related to inflammation, mood, and cardiovascular risk factors. Now, that doesn't mean vitamin D is some magical cure-all, and not everybody needs to supplement it, but many people do, and especially if they get limited sun exposure or already have low levels. So I wouldn't frame vitamin D as universally essential for every person in every context. Now we move into the second category, situational supplements. These are supplements that also work, but only under certain conditions, because a supplement can be highly useful for one person and almost pointless for another. That is what makes supplement advice tricky. People want universal rules, but a lot of supplements don't work like that. First, here is magnesium. Magnesium is involved in a huge number of functions in the body, ranging from energy production to muscle and nerve function. It also plays a role in maintaining a steady heart rhythm, strong bones, and healthy blood sugar levels. So yes, it matters. And if you are deficient, magnesium can absolutely be helpful. It may help if you have sleep issues. It may help if you have experienced muscle cramps. It may help if your dietary intake is low. But if your diet already covers your magnesium needs reasonably well, you may notice absolutely nothing from taking more. Magnesium is not fake. It's just more condition dependent than many people think. Next is omega-3. Omega-3 fatty acids are essential polyunsaturated fats that your body cannot produce on its own. They are important for heart health, brain function, and regulating inflammation throughout the body. So from a health perspective, yes, omega-3 matters. And for people who rarely eat fatty fish, supplementing omega-3 can make a lot of sense. It can also be relevant in certain inflammatory conditions or dietary patterns where intake is clearly low. But if you're regularly eating salmon or other fatty fish a couple times per week, then an omega-3 supplement becomes much less necessary. So again, useful? Yes. Automatically essential for everybody? No. It depends what your diet already provides. Beta-Carotene. Beta-Carotene is not something I would call essential for most people, but I also wouldn't throw it straight into the useless category either. Beta-Carotene is a plant pigment that your body can convert into vitamin A, which is important for vision, immune function, and overall health. So in that sense, yes, it does have a real function, but here's the key point. For most people, beta-carotene is usually better obtained through the food rather than through a dedicated supplement. If your diet already includes foods like carrots, sweet potatoes, spinach, kale, and other colorful vegetables, you're already getting it naturally. Then we have the multivitamin. And honestly, I think the best way to describe multivitamins is exactly this. They are nutritional insurance. That's it. Easy. A multivitamin is not there to transform your health. It is not there to compensate for consistently poor habits, and it is not a replacement for eating real food, but it can help fill certain nutritional gaps, especially for vitamins and minerals that are commonly under-consumed. Now, if your diet is already excellent, varied, and covers all your micronutrient needs consistently, then technically you don't need a multivitamin. But let's be honest, most people do not have a perfect diet like that all the time. And that is why I think a multivitamin can be a reasonable situational supplement. Next is Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha sits in an interesting space because it tends to be marketed heavily around stress, recovery, cortisol, and even performance. And to be fair, there are some reasons people talk about it. For some individuals, it may help reduce perceived stress, support relaxation, and perhaps have some indirect benefit on recovery or well-being. But this is not one I would put in the clear essential category. Why? Because its effects tend to be more individual, more subjective, and far less universally noticeable than something like creatine or protein. So can it help? Potentially, yes, especially if stress management is a real issue. But the response is not as predictable, and it is definitely not something I would prioritize over the basics. Next is fluid replacement. Now this one is a little different because technically hydration is not really a supplement. But when we talk about fluid replacement products, things like sports drinks, electrolyte drinks, or hydration formulas, then I would place those in the situational category. Why? Because they can absolutely be useful. If you're training for a long time, sweating heavily, working out in hot conditions, doing endurance sessions, or losing a lot of fluid during exercise, replacing fluids and sometimes electrolytes can help maintain performance and make the session feel noticeably better. Dehydration can impair physical and mental performance, and even relatively small fluid losses during exercise can start to matter. At the same time, more is not always better because overdrinking can also create problems. So this is not just about drinking as much as possible, it's about replacing what makes sense for the situation. But for the average person doing a normal gym session, usually plain water is enough. Helpful in the right context, unnecessary in the wrong one. And then there are probiotics. This is another supplement category where context matters a lot. Probiotics may be helpful for some people, especially depending on digestive issues or certain gut-related concerns. But probiotics are not automatically beneficial. Your diet, fiber intake, food quality, and overall digestive health patterns still matter far more than simply throwing in a probiotic and hoping for the best. So again, this is situational, sometimes helpful, sometimes unnecessary, very dependent on the individual. And as you have probably realized by now, some of these essential and situational supplements could almost be flipped around depending on the person, because whether something is essential or situational often depends on your current vitamin and mineral levels, your training, your diet, your lifestyle, and your actual needs. Which means something that is situational for you could genuinely be essential for somebody else. With that said, let's move into the category that tends to drain the most money while giving the least meaningful return. First, fat burners. Fat burners are usually marketed as products that increase fat metabolism, enhance energy, or suppress appetite. And technically, some ingredients in them may offer modest support in those areas. But the way fat burners are marketed and the way they actually perform are usually two very different things. Most fat burners are basically some combination of caffeine, mild stimulants, and marketing. That's really what a lot of them come down to. And while they may create a slight increase in energy or appetite suppression, they do not burn meaningful fat in the way people imagine. Fat loss still comes down primarily to being in a calorie deficit over time. That is still the core driver. So if someone is not in a calorie deficit, a fat burner is not going to produce the result they want. And if someone is in a calorie deficit, then the fat burner is usually playing a much smaller role than the product label would like them to believe. So for most people, this is a poor place to put their money. Next is BCAAs. BCAAs are primarily marketed to reduce muscle soreness, limit muscle breakdown, and delay fatigue during exercise. And while they became extremely popular in fitness culture, their usefulness is often far more limited than people think. Here's the key issue. Muscle growth requires all 9 essential amino acids. BCAAs only provide 3 of them. So while BCAAs can help initiate parts of the muscle building process, they cannot complete that process alone. If the other 6 essential amino acids are missing, your body does not suddenly build more muscle just because you drank flavored BCAAs. In fact, if your overall protein intake is already sufficient, you are already getting BCAAs through normal protein-rich foods anyway. So in summary, if you eat enough protein, you are already getting BCAAs. And if you're not eating enough protein, then your focus should probably be on fixing total protein intake first rather than buying a separate BCAA product. And the last one here is glutamine. Glutamine is a conditionally essential amino acid, which means your body usually makes enough of it on its own. But under periods of extreme stress, illness, injury, or heavy physiological demand, the need can increase. It has roles in gut lining integrity, immune cell function, and recovery support. It may also help reduce soreness and support anti-catabolic processes during intense training or restrictive dieting. So it's not that glutamine does nothing, it's that in healthy, well-nourished people, it does not tend to increase muscle mass or strength in a meaningful way, especially not compared to something like creatine or simply getting enough protein, which means once again again, if you have money to spend and you want best return, your money is usually better spent elsewhere. And by this point, you have probably already figured something out. I have basically been talking through my own supplement history this entire time. Because yes, a lot of the supplements I listed in the essential and situational sections are supplements I personally take on a fairly regular basis. Yeah, because you showed it off, also dum-dum. And the ones I placed in the unessential section, those are supplements I used to take, sometimes for years, and eventually stopped, because it's one thing to explain supplements in theory, and it's another thing to say after all the reading, all the training, all the trial and errors, and all the years of being around this stuff, what actually stayed and what didn't. So let me give you the personal side of this. Not because my exact routine is the routine everybody should copy. When I say I take these on a fairly regular basis, I mean I take most of them often enough that they are genuinely part of my routine. I would say for a lot of them, it ends up being around 4 days a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. One thing I always try to pay attention to is dosage. I generally prefer lower dose supplements when possible, especially with vitamins and minerals, because I do not like the idea of taking huge amount of something for long periods of time when I don't actually need that much. A lot of supplement companies load products aggressively because bigger numbers look more impressive. More is not automatically better, and in some cases, overdoing certain vitamins and minerals for long stretches is not smart at all. That's my general philosophy. Use them to support the basics, not replace them. So with that said, let me quickly run through the supplements I still use, why I use them, and then the ones I dropped over the years when I realized they weren't doing what I thought they were doing. First, creatine. I try to take about 10 plus grams a day of creatine to get the most out of physical and mental benefits. Protein powder. For me, because I fast for around 16 hours a day and eat within a 8-hour feeding window, getting enough protein during that shorter period can sometimes be more difficult than people might think. When you structure your meals well, there are still days where you fall a bit short. Maybe timing gets off, maybe my appetite is lower, maybe the day just gets busy. It fills the gap on the days where food alone doesn't get me all the way there without forcing an extra full meal that I don't necessarily want. So for me, protein powder is not a everyday must. It's more like a very reliable backup that becomes more useful often enough to justify always having it in the cabinet. Then there's caffeine. And yes, this one is definitely part of my routine. Usually through pre-workouts and energy drinks, because I don't drink coffee. Not because coffee is bad, I just don't like the taste. So caffeine for me usually comes in the form of a pre-workout before the gym, and then an energy drink during the day as well. And if I'm being completely honest, the math on some days, I can definitely see that I'm taking in more caffeine than ideally would want to. Vitamin D. Living in Sweden, this one feels pretty easy to justify. We have just come out of what felt like one of the darker periods imaginable, and Sweden is not exactly known for giving you generous sunlight for most of the year. Then summer shows up and goes completely the other direction. But for a large chunk of the year, sunlight exposure is not exactly something I want to rely on. So for me, vitamin D makes sense. Then we have magnesium. Sometimes I jokingly call them sleeping pills, even though that's obviously not what they really are. This one has a bunch of ingredients which include magnesium and a few ingredients aimed at helping sleep and relaxation. And I do think I notice a difference from these, but I don't take them every night. Usually when I know I got to bed later than I should have, or when I know I'm not going to get the amount of sleep I ideally want, and I want to improve the quality of the sleep I'm going to get if I get to bed on time and my routine is where it should be, I usually don't take them. Omega-3. I don't eat a lot of fish, and because I know the general benefits associated with omega-3 intake, I use it as a kind of insurance, just filling in a fairly obvious gap. Beta-Carotene. I take these mostly not because I necessarily need it, but it seems to give you a better tan, I have heard. Probably should stop taking these. Probably should cut that part out also. Multivitamin. Because with fasting and with the way I structure my meals, there are times where I feel like I might not be covering every vitamin and mineral perfectly every single day. And that's where the multivitamin comes in. Not as a replacement for food, just as a basic safety net. And because multivitamins are often fairly cheap, I think that makes the decision even easier. As long as you're choosing one with sensible amounts rather than some ridiculously overbuilt formula. Then we have Ashwagandha. I originally started taking these because of the way it's talked about in relation to stress reduction and overall calmness. Now, I wouldn't describe myself as an especially stressed person by default, at least not in the way people usually mean that, but I still became curious about it, partly because it seemed like one of those supplements where if it helps even a little bit, that might be worthwhile. And I would say I do feel something from it. Fluid replacement. Every morning, because even though I drink a lot of water throughout the day, I try to not drink a lot before bed to not ruin my sleep. In my mind, I think I have been without water for so long when I wake up that taking a fluid replacement feels like a good choice. Probiotics. I think my tum-tum is a bit sensitive to certain foods, or at least sensitive enough that I notice it sometimes. Taking these is another insurance for me that I feel like I can go on with the diet I have and eat restricted whatever I want. Now let's get into the other side of this. The supplements I used to take and eventually stop. First, fat burners. I took fat burners for years, on and off, and sometimes almost year-round. Sometimes with caffeine, sometimes without. Sometimes in phases where I genuinely believed they were giving me some extra edge. And looking back, the logic felt so obvious at the time. I want to burn fat. This product says it helps burn fat, so I should take a fat burner. The more I learned, the more I realized most of these products were underwhelming at best, and mostly just selling an idea. And the versions that contained a lot of caffeine became especially stupid in my case, because when you combine those with an already high caffeine intake from other sources, the total can get ridiculously. There were probably days where I was up to around 800 to 900 milligrams of caffeine, which is not good at all. Next is BCAAs. I used to take these during workouts because I thought it would give me more energy, improve recovery, and just generally help me perform better. And to be fair, for a long time, I genuinely believed it was doing something important. But after taking it regularly for years, almost daily, I eventually stopped. And when I stopped, I noticed basically no meaningful difference. Next, glutamine. During and post workout. I believed this was essential to help me recover, and I stopped when I learned that eating enough protein does the same thing. So I stopped taking this and focused on my protein intake instead. And that's the full list. That is the honest version of what stayed, what didn't, and how my thinking changed over time. And honestly, I don't even want to think about how much money I have spent over the years on supplements that turned out to be completely unnecessary. When you take something every day for months or years and then realize it was never really doing much in the first place, that number adds up very quickly. Probably faster than most people would like to admit. And the crazy part is, the list I covered in this video is still just a tiny fraction of what exists out there. There are probably hundreds of different supplements on the market, maybe more, and these are just the ones I have personally come across, used, looked into, or seen enough of over the course of my own journey to have a real opinion on them. Here is the uncomfortable truth. If your sleep is bad, if your training isn't progressive, and if your nutrition isn't consistent, no supplement is going to fix that. Because supplements are the final 5%. And most people are trying to optimize that last 5% before they have even take care of the first 95%. A supplement doesn't ask much from you. That's part of the appeal. It feels productive. It feels like action. It feels like progress before progress has actually been earned. And sometimes that feeling is exactly what people are buying. So before you buy your next supplement, ask yourself one simple question. Is this fixing a real problem, or am I just hoping for a shortcut? Because that question alone can save you a lot of money, a lot of false hope, and a lot of wasted time. And really, if I had to summarize this entire video in one sentence, it would be this. Most people do not need more supplements. They need better judgment about which supplements are actually worth taking. Because some supplements truly are useful, but many others are just dressed up optimism. And if your foundation is weak, even the good ones won't do much for you. So fix the basics first. Then, once that foundation exists, use supplements the way they were always meant to be used. As small additions, no miracle answers. If you enjoyed this video, show some love by hitting that like button. Let me know in the comments below if there are any other health-related topics you want to see a video of. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.